Welcome everybody to a Book of Revelations. So we have 2 classes left. And let me make sure, can everybody see the slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, gotta get Bernie in. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do for our last 2 classes. Today we're gonna hit 12 through 16. And I just say, hold on to your horses, man. It's going to be a ride. And then next week, we're going to take 17 to 22 and bring it all to a close. Okay. It's been a whirlwind. It will continue to be one. Okay. So let's talk about what happened last. So the last time we were together, we did 8, 9, 10, and 11. So 8 was that third of everything was destroyed. Meaning, like, think of it as a 3-legged stool. About one leg, you're all out of balance, chaos. 9 was those really sad verses. Life was just so bad, people wanted to die. And death represented hope, and it wasn't available for them. And then we had the army of locusts. And so here's some of the images that we saw, kind of the raining down of the destruction. And this was, remember, in 8 and 9. We talked about how Charles Manson used some of this as justification for his work. Here's those crazy little locusts. And then we got to 10 and 11. And in 10, we saw that rainbow appear and harken back to Genesis and the sign of hope and the covenant. And then 11, we had this kind of odd interlude of the measuring of the temple and the 2 witnesses that showed up and then were killed and then resurrected. So we had the 2 witnesses. Okay, here's what's going to happen next. We're going to meet the pregnant woman and we're going to meet the dragon. And the woman's going to give birth. Michael's going to fight the dragon. Everything you're going to encounter in the next 55 minutes is a story about Roman oppression. Okay. So in 12, she's going to escape. In 13, we're going to meet another beast. This one's from the sea. We're going to meet the beast from the earth. We're going to deal with 666. So we are going to cover that this week. And then in 14, we're going to see the prediction of the falling of Rome, which John's going to refer to it as Babylon. And hear a lot of kind of judgment about what happens to you if you are complicit with Rome. 15 and 16, we're going to go into the 7 plagues, the 7 bowls of God's anger. Throughout everything you're about to see, I just want you to have in front of you propaganda. It's a treatise against Roman oppression. Okay, so everything that we're dealing with, in the back of your mind, I just want you to remember, oh, John's saying this so that he doesn't get killed, right, for saying bad things about Rome, right? Okay, we're ready to dive in. Revelations 12. A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant, was crying out in birth pangs in the agony of giving birth. Then another portent appeared in heaven, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his head. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child, so he might devour her child as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was snatched away and taken to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, so that there she can be nourished for 1,260 days. Okay. Some of the paintings of said woman. And you can start to see the beast appearing in some of them. Okay, so when we hear about the pregnant woman, you can either think of it as Mary. This is a story about Mary and Jesus, or you can think about it as the woman represents the early church, right? If it's a woman, she's giving birth to Christ. If it is the church is the woman, the birth is the birth of the early church, right? Regardless of either answer, and you could use either one, the dragon is going to represent the evil, which is Rome, which wants to destroy. So either Rome wants to destroy the church, Rome wants to destroy Christ. They kind of mean the same thing. And God's not going to let that happen. And Our Lady of Guadalupe is inspired by that passage right there. So a lot of the depictions of the Lady of Guadalupe will have a lot of the imagery from Revelations 12. Now, I'm not going to read everything, but a couple of things I want to call out. So, and war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And then the next part that comes, remember, this is a letter being read in worship. So you could just imagine that you have the front part read, and then the whole congregation will join in singing or praying that next section. Okay, so we have Michael coming to bear on the giant dragon. This one looks very Game of Thrones to me. Any of you, that looks like a Game of Thrones dragon, if any of you watch Game of Thrones. This one less so. Very small dragon, right? It's a medieval one. Okay, so many of you have taken my hell class, right? So what we know is that Satan means an accuser, so somebody an adversary to God. So this whole kind of image of Satan as this separate evil being, that comes century and centuries later. That's all driven from Paradise Lost into the 1600s, right? So what the ancients are doing when they talk about Satan is they're talking about a being that is going to take a position opposite of God, right? So anytime we take a position opposite of God, we are Satan. Satan isn't the little red guy with the horns, right? Okay. Interestingly enough, Michael is the only named angel in Revelations, and Michael appears nowhere else in the New Testament. Is found in the Hebrew scriptures, but not anywhere in the New Testament. So this is Michael's one appearance, and Michael fights the dragon and neutralizes it. So then we go on, but man, this dragon got staying power. So when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the two wings of the great eagle so that she could fly from the serpent into the wilderness to a place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time. Then from his mouth the serpent poured water like a river after the woman to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman. It opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon was angry with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her children, those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. Then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore. Okay, so dragon is not happy, right? He gets banished, so he's going after the woman again, and she's going to escape, but this time she's going to escape with the help of creation. Like the world is going to, the natural world steps in to help her escape. And then the dragon's going to get frustrated again, and it's going to go off to make war on her children. So again, the woman, just imagine early church, the dragon, the beast, Rome. So we're hearing about this conflict, this unending conflict. There's no peace. There's just the beast coming back and back and back, and unrelenting oppression. Okay, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 diadems, and on its heads were blasphemous names. And I'm going to go down. The beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwelled in heaven. And it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. It was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all the inhabitants of the earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered. Okay, again, it's Rome. It's Rome. And it's really thinly veiled. There are 10 provinces in Rome. And John's referring to the 7 great emperors or Caesars. It could be that in this section, John's just saying it's Nero, who was considered the pinnacle of anti-Christian evil. Nero was particularly fond of persecuting Christians. The reference to the blasphemous names refer to the fact that the Caesars refer to themselves as divine. The emperors were divine, the Son of God, Lord. Those were titles that the Roman emperors used for themselves. And that Christians are not saying, no, those titles only belong to Christ. It's all a thinly veiled takedown of Rome, all of it. And it's just not safe for John to say what he really wants to say. Okay. So let anyone who has an ear listen. If you are to be taken captive into captivity, you go. If you kill with the sword you must be killed. And then I'm going to go down to the end. They're talking about the beast here, right? Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slaved, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell who does not have the mark, that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person. Its number is 666. Okay, there's the infamous 666, right? Okay, so now we understand the context here. It's all a political takedown of Rome, right? So we still have the beast acting up and reaching out. We have taken this and really, really just run with it and literalized it and slapped it on our understandings of the devil and Satan. It makes really, really good horror films. Okay, so what this passage is talking about, if you think back last week, I think we talked about it is that if you weren't a Roman citizen, if you didn't have that mark of citizenship, you could not sell, you could not prosper, right? So you only could get ahead if you were a citizen. And none of these Jews were citizens, right? So they were constantly under the system of economic oppression, severely disadvantaged. And they blamed Rome, they blamed Nero for their hardship, rightly so. They couldn't prosper, right? Okay, so this is the passage where a lot of people draw from the Antichrist. Remember, did anybody see the term Antichrist in there? Anything that looked like Antichrist? We're going to go back and just make sure. Okay, just look, anything that could be applied as the Antichrist. This is where Justified comes from, this 666 passage, right? Okay. So It's not there, right? So what John is doing with this passage is saying, look, I will lose my head if I name the bad guy here, but you all know who it is, right? And so almost all biblical scholars think John is referring to Nero, and his audience would have gotten that. So if you use Hebrew numerology, remember 7 is perfection, 3 is balance or completion, 6 less than perfection, imperfection, incompleteness. So 3 6s in a row is perfect imperfection, right? So that could either be Rome or Nero, either one, right? This came up, somebody brought this one up, that what the Jehovah's Witnesses believe about both that 144,000 one, but also the 666 is that this is the unified governments that are opposed to God. So it's not, it's all about Rome. It's all about Rome. It's all about Rome. Okay. Then I looked, and there was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their forehead. I'm going on, skipping then. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. These follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They have been redeemed from humankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb, and in their mouth no lie was found. They are blameless. So in heaven, we have Christ with these 144,000 individuals. Okay. It's a chapter 14 is a pretty hard one to understand in general, right? Very foreign to us, a lot of hyperbolic language. 144,000 is code for infinity, bajillions, right? So this is the one where Seventh-day Adventists, it's not Jehovah's Witness, Seventh-day Adventists believe that when that the world was going to end when 144,000 people became Seventh-day Adventists. They then changed that when it did become 144,000 Adventists to there's some type of special mark of those individuals. Now I want to talk about this last one because scholars are mixed on this last section here about the virginity, because some scholars think that it's a later addition that would justify celibacy, and that's why it's in there. And some scholars theorize that it's in there because it's calling for kind of a new ethos in typically in war, women were sexually assaulted, and that this was a call for a new ethos in terms of not sexually defiling, sexually assaulting women during those times of violence. It could go either way on that one. We don't know for sure. So it either may have been later added to support celibacy, and we have other examples of New Testament writings being modified to support policies that are emerging in the early church, or it may be a rather powerful statement that a respect for human rights. Okay, Revelations 14. Then I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people. Really inclusive language there, right? Everyone. Fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth and the sea and the springs of water. Then another angel, a second, followed, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Then another angel, those who worship the beast and its image and receive a mark on their foreheads or on their hands, they will also drink the wine of God's wrath, poured unmixed into the cup of his anger. And they will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. There is no rest day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, and for anyone who receives the mark of its name. Pretty strong language, right? Okay. So it begins with this kind of beautiful note of inclusion, right? Good news to every nation, every tribe, every language, every people. But then it's going into Babylon. Again, Babylon is Rome. And this is a call to resist that, right? That if you don't resist, if you don't actively resist, you are complicit in these efforts that are going to just harm Christianity. And if you do that, you are going to suffer. So John's going back to this central theme of right belief and practices matter, right? So you have to believe and behave in a certain way in opposition to Rome. And this is all, remember, a letter to these congregations who are living under a oppressive Roman system. And John is attempting to encourage them to stay strong in their Christian beliefs. Okay, now let's come to kind of the reaping. There's a first and a second reaping. Then I looked, and there was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like the Son of Man, with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. Another angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to the one who sat on the cloud. Use your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is fully ripe. So the one who sat on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. Then another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. Then another angel came from out the altar, the angel who has authority over fire. And he called with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, use your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe. So the angel swung his sickle over the earth and gathered the vintage of the earth, and he threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle for a distance of about 200 miles. All of this is imagery that would have made sense to John's audience, right? All of it, it's like making references to the Kardashians. In 2,000 years, no one will understand that, right? But chances are, even if you've never watched it, you have some context of it. That's what John's doing here. He's using images that mean something to his audience. This one's kind of interesting in the bottom. You can actually see the horses and their little bridle and then the blood flying up of it. This is a medieval one. And then you got the sickle going and the grapes going. So this picture actually has everything from that passage. Okay, it's the first harvest. The first harvest is the faithful souls. The second harvest is the unfaithful. Those are the people who are complicit with Rome. So this is what happened if you don't follow right beliefs and right practices. It was a really, really big deal in the first and second centuries. A really big deal. We saw it in Paul's letters, and we're seeing it here in Revelations. Okay, Revelations 15. Now we're going to go into the 7 plagues. So I'm just going to actually just stop and kind of check in. So that takes us up to last week, and now we're heading into the plagues. And the plagues are going to be very similar to what those of you that did Exodus with me, a lot of allusions to the plagues in Egypt. Questions, comments, reaction of what got us to this point in time. Beast equals Rome. Babylon equals Rome. Dragons equal Rome. 666 equals Rome.
So reading these last chapters from 12 on, knowing that all of that was Rome, then you're reading it, you're understanding it, and you're not putting your own take on it, right? Which is not the way it's presented in the world.
Yeah.
And the damage that's been done. So I understand what John's doing. So there were a lot of people Roman citizens that were not bad people, you know, they've been born into this and the gods and all that kind of stuff. But they're, you know, the idea is that those people wouldn't, I assume, not be destroyed, but the people in power is what he's talking about. I mean, everybody gets it. So
it's a very clear line, remember, because apocalyptic leadership is real dualistic. Good, bad, evil, perfection, right? So it's either you're in or you're out. And you're either complicit with Rome and you're, you know, reaping all the benefits of being a Roman citizen, or you are aligned with Christ. There's no middle ground for John. There's no middle ground for any apocalyptic writer.
Right. So the message that comes out now that we hear is only Christians, 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 Christians. The rest of them are not the right religion. I mean, that's.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And what John would say is, it's less about what you call yourself and more about your practices and your beliefs, right?
Right.
It's about how are you living your life and in relationship to Christ. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else? Everyone okay? Okay. Gird yourself. We're going into the plagues. Ready? Okay. Revelations 15. Steve, would you mind reading this one so that I'll give you a break from listening to my voice?
Sure. Then I saw another portent in heaven, great and amazing, 7 angels with 7 plagues, which are the last, for with them the wrath of God is ended. And I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass mixed with fire, and those who had conquered the beast and its image and the number of its name, standing beside the sea of glass with harps of God in their hands. And they sang the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. Great and amazing are your deeds, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, King of the nations. Lord, who will not fear and glorify your name? For you alone are holy. All nations will come and worship before you, for your judgments have been revealed. After this I looked, and the temple of the tent of witness in heaven was opened, and out of the temple came the 7 angels and the 7 plagues, robed in pure bright linen, with golden sashes across their chests. Then one of the 4 living creatures gave the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. And no one could enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were ended.
Can John use the word 7 any more times? I don't believe it's possible. There's a lot of 7s. Okay, and you all know why he's doing that.
That's
perfect. It's going to symbolize holiness, right? Right. So the wrath of God is going to be distributed to these 7 angels, and they are going to dump it on the earth, right? That's what's going to happen. Okay. But John gives us a little note of hope saying, you know, God's anger is going to end. This is time limited. Again, we go into this type of hymn. So imagine that's like your bulletin, that piece right there. That's your bulletin. You'd have a reader at the beginning, and then you would all join together to either sing or to recite that hymn. And then you would go on. And then we have the 7 bowls. The symbol of a bowl means that it's finite. It can only hold so much, right? So we have 7 of these finite kind of bowls of wrath that are coming, that are going to be very, that are going to resonate with the Exodus and the plagues in the Exodus. So so this one is the first angel. So the first angel went and poured his bowl on the earth, and a foul and painful sore came on those who had the mark of the beast and who worshipped its image. The second angel poured his bowl into the sea, and it became like the blood of a corpse, and every living thing in the sea died. The third angel poured his bowl into the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. Lots of blood images in this one. Okay, so for the ancients, in ancient Hebrew context, blood was the source of life. So the blood of life. So there's a lot of images in the Bible related to blood and life. And John's playing on that with the removal of life from these kind of plagues. Okay, the fourth angel poured his bowl on the sun, and it was allowed to scorch people with fire. The fifth angel poured his bowl on the throne of the beast, and the kingdom was plunged into darkness. People gnawed their tongues in agony. They did not repent of their deeds. The sixth angel poured his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up in order to prepare the way for the kings from the east. And then it goes on to say they assembled them at a place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. We're going to come back to that. And then the seventh angel poured his bowl into the air, and then we hear, "It is done." And then after we hear that it is done, then we have earthquakes and lightnings and a great city split in third. So we have the destruction of Babylon. Okay, so that's what happens at the end of the 7 plagues. And the people don't repent. They don't change their hearts and their lives. So very similar to Pharaoh in Exodus. It took a lot for Pharaoh to finally make that change. Pharaoh wasn't swayed by the plagues, and neither are the people of Babylon. So the plagues keep going on. The reference to the Euphrates drying up really played on a bit of paranoia for John's audience, because that river represented the boundary of the Roman Empire. So basically, anybody beyond the Euphrates was an enemy and dangerous. So when the Euphrates dries up, you just have basically a little pathway for anybody to invade. So John's playing on the paranoia of people in the Roman Empire. Okay, let's deal with Armageddon. That word has a lot of baggage. It's often actually spelled without the H. You almost always see it without the H. It is an actual place that you can go and visit. And he is referring to Mount Megiddo, which is located in the Sea of Galilee near Mount Carmel. You can go to the top of it. I celebrated a beautiful ecumenical communion service on the top of that with a group of people I was traveling with. This is where Elijah defeated the prophets of Baal. So John is playing on imagery that's going to mean a lot to his readers, right, who are Jewish. And it's going to basically say, as the story did about Elijah, that the God of the Jews is stronger than any other God, right? So what John is basically saying is, same thing's going to happen again. God's going to triumph, right? It's only referenced right here in 16:16. It's nowhere else in the New Testament. It is almost like a passing comment, right? So where they assemble. And so what John is doing with that comment is he's saying, yeah, God did it before with Elijah. God's going to do it again. And John's Jewish audience would have gotten that. They would have understood that. What Left Behind theology says about Armageddon, and there's a whole book in the Left Behind series on Armageddon, that this is the cosmic battle of the ages. And this is the last battle that takes place before the new heaven and the new earth. And the Antichrist, which again, we've gotten really deep in Revelations. We have not met him yet. He's going to gather all the kings together in Armageddon, and the ones that are loyal to the Antichrist are going to bring their armies and they're going to war against the people of the God, right? So that's what left behind. That's the narrative that has been created about Armageddon. Okay, I'm going to stop there. The question for reflection I wanted to spend some time on is actually, what is today's beast or Babylon? What is today's beast or Babylon? John writes this letter to his people about what is oppressing them, what is keeping them from God, what is basically tempting them, pulling them away from God. The beast and Babylon, since John wrote this, have been changed throughout time, right? So once the church becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire, the beast is going to become the heretics, the people who are putting forth teachings that go against the hierarchy of the church. The beast and Babylon for Martin Luther are going to be the Catholic Church. He's going to write extensively about Babylon and the beast and use this imagery from Revelations. And he's going to basically throw shade at the Catholic Church. So who the beast is and who Babylon is changes through time. So that's what I'm going to send you out into small groups in. Who is the beast or Babylon now? Okay. As I'm doing that, anybody got any questions? I have to divide up the Catholics while I'm doing this.
Can I tell a story about heretics?
Yeah, I love heretic stories.
When my little sister was getting ready for confirmation, the priest came in and told her class that only Catholics went to heaven. And Stephanie came back to my mother and told my mother that this is what the priest had said. Well, we're going into Mass on Sunday, and Father Celsus, Chris knows him, is standing out in front of church. And my mother walks up to him and says, "You told Stephanie that only Catholics go to heaven, and we don't believe that. And I'm telling her that, that's not true." And he looked at my mother and said, "Helen, you're a heretic and you're going to hell." And my mother said, "Fine, Father, I'll see you there." That was my mother. But, she didn't bother her that she was a heretic. But, it was like, we came from a very open religious feeling about people. And for Stephanie to be told only Catholics went to heaven just didn't go well with my mother.
I was told the same thing in second grade. That's when I pulled the plug.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that will happen with Christianity over the course of 1900 years from where we're at right now. Okay, you're going out. Your question is, who is the beast or Babylon in our times? And I'll give you about 8 minutes, okay? Enjoy. Okay, everyone's back. What'd you come up with?
Intolerance.
Intolerant. All right. What else?
We couldn't nail any one thing, except we came up with intolerance. We named a few individual things, but it's like, over the centuries, intolerance is what hasn't changed. And it's just different people have owned it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of covers
That
everything.
idea, ours was kind of that the beast is the oppressor, and it depends on who you are, who the oppressor is. I mean, if you were Gazan, it's one person. If you were a Native American, it was another person. If you were Black, it's another entity. It's another issue. So whoever the oppressor is, and that changes a lot. Kind of like tolerance changes.
And it depends upon who they are, who we are.
And we individually probably don't have a lot of oppressors because we happen to be of the privileged group.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Final thoughts on this one? It's really interesting how this imagery has been used throughout time to name enemies.
Mhm.
And it really was created to speak about what earlier you're talking about, the group that is oppressing them.
Mhm.
Yeah, it did get flipped throughout time.
I still say I'm sorry it was put into the Bible.
Galatians,
Yeah. Because, you know,
Yeah.
maybe it would,
It's been used so poorly.
yeah.
yeah. Well, I hold reserve judgment on that till next week. Because there is some interesting imagery we're going to encounter next week as John brings it to a conclusion about heaven on earth.
Mhm.
That I think is really worth spending some time with.
Mhm.
And you know, it just gets lost in the left behind thinking where you have people sucked up and taken to this other location, right?
Mhm.
And then, you know, the left behind are on earth, and that's just not how it ends. Give you a little, you know, sneak peek if you haven't read to the end. What ends up happening is that heaven is going to come to earth and God is going to dwell on earth. And I think that's got some really, really beautiful potential for thinking about our relationship with the earth and with the world. And so I don't know that it should have been in there. I do think there's some things that are worth not ignoring, maybe paying attention to, that we're going to come to next week. So reserve final judgment on Revelations until next week. So, but you know what I hope you're seeing is once you remove all of those misunderstandings about what we think is there, and instead strip it down to its context of a letter written to hurting communities who had every reason to be angry, to crave a wrathful God to come in and protect them. That this was probably a letter of consolation and a letter of call and a letter of reassurance and to the people who were reading it at that time, not intended to speak to us thousands of years later, or to draw observations about our world in a literal standpoint.
Well, I wish they'd put the context in there, something about the context. Along with Revelation. It's been helpful. I mean, because I've reading it now, I have a whole different feeling about it, right? But if someone had just put a little letter in there or something about the context, all would have to be what you said, Marci. Just it's about, against Rome.
But when you strip it out, it's kind of boring.
It's
a little boring.
Yeah, it's beautiful language and imagery. I mean, you talk about your imagination going when you're reading it. I mean, he has a flair with words for sure.
Definitely has inspired a lot of artwork.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Paul, what were you going to say, Paul?
Well, so they decided what was in the Bible and what wasn't in the Bible at like the Council of Trent. Is that right?
No.
What year did they decide it? That's what I'm after.
I'll bring that slide next week. That was in my Bible class, which apparently we lost the recording for, so I might have to redo that class. But they never had a council to decide what was in the Bible. They had councils to decide lots of things, but they did not have a council to decide what was in the Bible.
Okay,
And it was right in the mid 300s to 400, beginning of
okay.
400.
So you've explained very well why these letters were written to the different congregations. When they were written, why did they decide in the year 400 or 300 that they should be in part of the Bible?
The book of Revelations, this letter did not have a lot of champions for making it in. And
Okay.
remember, it's one of like 100 different letters, these apocalyptic revelations. So it's one of many. And it's kind of a whole genre that was out there. And it was a very, very late edition. Most of the canon was all in place. And it made it in for two reasons. First is because it was attributed to John. There were some that believed it was written by the author of the Gospel of John, which it was not. And the final decision for getting it in was made by people who believed that they could use the beast imagery
Mhm.
Against their own political enemies.
Okay,
So, yeah.
thank you.
Was there an entity that said, yes, we're gonna put the revelations in, and yes, we're gonna put in these 4 Bibles? I'm not Bibles, Gospels.
Yeah, I do a whole class on that, and I'll do it for you all next year, for those of you who haven't done it.
Okay.
It's really, it's, I call it the torrid tale of how the Bible came to be. It is a torrid tale. Yeah. So, yeah. So, okay, I'm gonna run to another meeting. We got one more. Just stick through it. You can do one
Okay,
more, and then we'll call it good after that one, okay?
okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.